Okay, guys. So please don't forget to turn your cameras on as we get started with today's class. Don't forget your cameras. I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds. All right. So this week and today, we're going to be working on the speaking section. We will start today and we'll take our time here working on the speaking section. So let's see, remember the speaking section is the third section of the test. It comes right after the listening. Well, that's not true. You actually have a 15-minute break between the listening and the speaking section, right? And it's over 30, just like the other sections. And it lasts approximately 20 minutes. Good news is that this section is remaining the same. So no matter when you take the test, the speaking section will be exactly the same if you take it now or if you take it after July the 26th, which is when they are making these changes. Right? So let's take a look at the speaking section. Let's see an overview of how it is. So here in the speaking section, you guys will have 4 different questions, right? 4 questions. Now, some of these questions, actually one of these questions is the independent question, and the other ones are called integrated. So by any chance, does anyone know what this means or why they are called that way, independent or integrated? Well, the thing is, when you have independent questions, and this applies for both the speaking and the writing sections, that means that the questions they will give you, the questions they will ask, will not depend on anything, right? As the name suggests. So it will be based, your answers have to be based entirely upon your opinions, entirely on your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas, your examples, your experiences. So you do not have to be summarizing anything, right? It's just the question and you answer it on the way that you want. You know, it's very like free in that sense. However, the integrated questions, on the other hand, those are the ones where you're going to have to be reading some content, listening to something, and then summarizing that information. So in the independent questions, you don't have to do any of that. You just get the question and answer it. But in the integrated questions, you will have to first read something or hear something and then summarize that information. So they give you the content that you're going to be working with. And your answers are not as free as the ones that you had in the independent. Okay? Now, today and this week, we're going to be working on the first question of the speaking section, which is the independent question. Okay, we will be working on question number 1, and then we'll continue with the other questions. Okay? Do you guys have any questions so far? All right. So before looking at the speaking section, it is necessary to let you guys know how they will be evaluating the speaking section. First thing we need to say is that this is a production section, which means that you will get to produce your own responses. It's not like the reading and the listening sections where you had multiple choice and you just had to choose an option and it was always going to be, you only had 2 options, right? It was a correct choice or it was an incorrect choice. Now, in this case, it doesn't work like that. There is no such thing as a correct speaking response or as an incorrect speaking response. So how do they actually evaluate your responses? How do you get the score that you get? They're going to be basing, well, first thing, you can find the actual rubrics, the actual criteria they use to evaluate the speaking section online. If you guys go to the ETS website, or if you just look up speaking TOEFL rubrics, then you guys will find this PDF, the first thing that pops up. And here in this document, I'm going to send you guys the link. You will find a full description on how they evaluate the speaking section. You have a different description for the independent speaking and another one for the integrated one. But in general, the categories that they divide this information into are three. You have the first one, which is delivery. You have the second, which is language use, and the third, which is topic development. Okay? And they give you a description of what you need to do and how your response has to be for you to get each one of these scores. The top score that you can get in each response is 4. So you can get a response of level 4, of a level 3, of a second level, or the first, or you can get a 0. And they give you a description of everything that you need to do in order to get one of these scores. But I'm gonna summarize that information for you, right? Let's see how they evaluate this speaking section. Now, in the first category, which is topic development, they are looking at 3 main things. The first one is for you to fulfill the task. So what does that mean? You actually have to do what they are asking you to do. You have to follow the instructions and answer the question correctly. So that is basically task fulfillment. It means that your response is coherent to the question. So if they are asking you about food and you start talking about music, it's not coherent, right? It doesn't make sense. Your response has to be concise, which means that you are not going over the same idea, being redundant and repetitive over and over again over the same thing, but instead it's concise. You know, you are able to express the ideas, although in few words, but they are clear, right? And obviously, it also, the way that you manage your time also matters. So ideally, you shouldn't have too much extra time because that means that your response is not well developed, and you should not run out of time because that means that you haven't organized your time well. Okay, so time management is another thing. Now, the second thing they're looking for is support and development. And this basically means that everything you're saying has to be supported, has to be elaborated and developed. You cannot just say something and leave it there. You have to make sure that you have appropriate and enough explanations, details, examples, that you justify what you're saying, right? So for example, if they ask you, do you prefer to run or to walk? And you just say, well, personally, I prefer to run because it's the best thing for me. It's always been that way. I love running and it's my favorite thing for me to do. I don't like walking, so I totally prefer running. So I just answered the question, right? But did I support my response? Did I develop it? I just said that I like running, but I didn't say why. I didn't give any type of justification. I didn't give any examples. I didn't give any details. So my response, although I did answer the question, I did say what I prefer. I didn't develop it, right? I didn't support my idea. So that is basically support and development. And finally, here we have connections and structure, which is related to how you connect your ideas and how the ideas progress. And obviously, it's related to you using different connectors, different transition words, to you using or having the correct structure, you having an introduction in the body of your response. So everything that's related to how the ideas are connected, right? Because if you start talking about running, you say, I love running. And then you say, actually, there's a celebrity that says that you have to exercise at least once a day. So those ideas are not really too related, right? But if I find a way to connect them and I say, I love running, plus it's a easy way to exercise or to work out. In fact, it is necessary to work out. For example, this celebrity says this, right? So I am connecting my ideas using those connectors, right? So that is important. All right, and everything that I mentioned is related to the topic and development. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions so far? All right. Now, the second category that also influences your score is the way that you deliver your response, the way that you speak, basically. Because you can say something very cool, you can have a great response, but if you don't deliver it, if you don't speak in an appropriate way, then your score won't be as good. So what does this mean? Obviously, pronunciation and intonation. One thing I want to make sure that I say here, when I say pronunciation, I don't mean that you shouldn't have an accent or that you have to sound like a native speaker. Okay, that is totally not the idea here. Remember that people from all over the world learn and speak English. So there are plenty of accents that you will find and that the TOEFL finds, right? Our accent is not the only one. But what I actually mean is that you have to pronounce the words in a way that they are easily understood, right? So for example, if I am saying the word delivery, so somebody that knows the word is going to understand that I'm saying delivery. But if instead of pronouncing it like that, I say, I don't know, let's say I say deliver, okay, it's not the same, right? So I'm not pronouncing it correctly, and you guys won't understand what I'm saying because it's not pronounced like that. So it's okay if you don't have a perfect, or if you don't sound like a native speaker, but the words that you are pronouncing have to be like easy to understand. Another thing is intonation. This is something that people underestimate a lot. So, you know, transmitting a message, expressing something is not just about what you're saying, but about how you're saying it, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen one of these TikToks where they are explaining how stressing certain words can change the meaning completely. Like if you have a phrase, let's say, that says, I didn't eat your sandwich, right? If you just say it like that, it means something. But if you stress, let's say, the first word and you're like, I didn't eat your sandwich, you are implicitly communicating the message that somebody else ate your sandwich, right? But if I say, I didn't eat your sandwich, then I am actually saying, well, I didn't do it. If I say, I didn't eat your sandwich, and I am stressing the eat, then I am transmitting a different message, right? I am saying that maybe I did something else with your sandwich, right? I didn't actually eat it. And if I say, I didn't eat your sandwich, then I am expressing that it wasn't your sandwich, right? But it was somebody else. So it is important that your speech is not linear, right? That you stress certain words, that you use your intonation to fit your message, right? That you articulate the words correctly. And of course, the main thing is that your response is intelligible. That means that it is easy to follow. Anybody who's hearing your response should be able to clearly understand what you're saying, right? That is intelligibility. And finally, obviously, it will affect your score if you guys are not so fluent. So you do not have to make too many pauses. You should not be using too many filler words. You should not be stopping to think too much. So how fluent you are also matters, of course. Okay, that's delivery. And finally, just to finish, another thing is language use, which is related to the language that you use for your response, right? So that means the vocabulary that you use. You have to use an appropriate vocabulary, academic vocabulary. You should not be speaking in a way that you would to like a friend. And you have to show a somewhat extent vocabulary. So like if you want to get the score of an advanced student, then you should be showing advanced vocabulary, right? If you just want to have a basic score, then your vocabulary will reflect that and you will just have basic vocabulary. And also it should be appropriate, right? So if you guys are talking about business, and instead of saying customers, you just say the people who buy products, then it's not appropriate, right? You can use better words. And finally, grammar. So when I say grammar, I mean using grammar correctly, not making too many grammar mistakes, but also showing grammar variety. That means showing that you have mastered different structures in the English language, right? So if you, again, it's the same as vocabulary. If you're gonna get a top score, then you need to show that you have mastered most, if not all of the grammar structures that you have in the English language. So you need to maybe use different tenses, different types of sentences, different connectors. You gotta use, I don't know, conditional sentences and everything else. Okay, guys? So this is it. That's how they evaluate your response. Depending on these things, depending on whether you are able to meet these rubrics or not, they give you your score, right? So that's it. Is this okay? Do you guys have any questions so far? All clear? Okay, guys. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and explain what this question is like. Remember, we said it's the independent question, right? So let's take a look. Okay, guys. So in this question, you will basically get a question on your screen. Why don't we see an example? I think that's the best way, right? So that I don't explain things too much, but you actually get to see them on your own. So let me show you guys an example so that you see what I actually mean. Okay, guys. Let me show.
Number 1. In this question, you will be asked to give your opinion about a familiar topic. After you hear the question, you will have 15 seconds to prepare your response and 45 seconds to speak. State whether you agree or disagree with the following statement. Then explain your reasons, using specific details in your explanation. Learning through online courses is more effective than learning in the traditional classroom setting.
Begin to prepare your response after the beep.
Okay. So as you can see, when you get to this question, first you will get the instructions, right? Which will tell you, in this question, you will be asked to give your opinion about something. You will get 15 seconds to prepare after you hear the question and 45 seconds to speak, right? So that's exactly what you have to do here. You get the question, and this is the question that we have here. So, Nicolas, could you please read the question?
Yeah, sure. State whether you agree or disagree with the following statement. Then explain your reasons using specific details in your explanation. Learning through online courses is more effective than learning in the traditional classroom setting.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicolas. So as you guys can see, the question is very subjective, right? It's something that could be up to debate. It's something that not everybody will have the same opinion about. But the important thing is that you have your own opinion. Now, in the question, they are explicitly telling you to state, to basically say whether or if you agree or disagree with this following statement. So they just give you two options, right? You can agree with the statement or you can disagree with the statement. But there's no middle ground. There's no way that you can be like, maybe that, I don't know, maybe some of you guys are going to be like, well, I think it depends, or well, I think both are okay, both have their advantages and disadvantages. You cannot say something like that in this response. You have to either completely agree with this statement or completely disagree with it, but you do not have a third option, okay? And then they say, explain your reasons. So you have to give reasons and explain them using specific details, right? With details. So that is what they're asking you. Now, what is this statement that they want us to agree or disagree with? This is the one, right? Learning through online courses is more effective than learning in the traditional classroom setting. So after you get the question, you will technically have, as you have here, 15 seconds to prepare your response. Now, during these 15 seconds, you guys can think about your response, think about the reasons you will give, and that's it. And then you will have 45 seconds to answer this question, to say whether you agree or disagree and explain your response. And as you can see, it's going to be exactly like you had here. They give you 15 seconds. You can see the timer there and it's counting down, starting with 15 seconds. And then after the 15 seconds are over, look at this part.
Begin speaking after the beep.
Right? Once the 15 seconds are over, they will tell you, begin speaking after the beep. You will hear the beep and your 45 seconds are going to start counting down. And you have to start speaking. They will be recording your response and then they will evaluate it, right? But they will be recording it. So is this okay in terms of the format? Do you guys have any questions about how this works? What do you have to do? Is everything clear?
Andrea, how can we start this response?
Okay, we'll talk about this in a little bit. Any other question before we start looking at the response? Okay. So let's see what we actually have to do. So I am going to, I don't know which one. Here. Okay, so the statement was learning through online courses is more efficient than learning in the traditional classroom setting. Right? This was the question. So we will see what we actually have to do. Now, technically, you would, after hearing the question, get 15 seconds to prepare, right? During these 15 seconds, what you guys are going to do is you're going to think and take notes about your response to the question. In this case, you have to take a side, right? Whether you agree or disagree with this statement. So what do you guys think? Do we say that we agree or that we disagree?
Disagree.
Okay, so we do not think that online courses are, sorry, I was muted. Okay, so we do not think that online courses are more efficient. We actually think that that the traditional classroom setting is more efficient, right? So in that case, what we're gonna do is in your notes, what you should do is you should write down the word. In this case, the question is, do you agree or disagree, right? So we're gonna pick a side and write it down in our notes. So in this case, we're saying that we disagree. We will write that down. Disagree. And another thing that we're gonna write down is one reason why we disagree with this statement. So why do you guys disagree? Why do you think that the traditional classroom setting is more efficient? You guys think of a reason?
You have a learning face-to-face with your teacher, I think.
Okay, you can be face-to-face with your teacher, but how does that help you learn?
You can ask your dog more easily and more efficient, I think.
Okay, you can ask your questions more easily. Okay. I like that. All right. So, you know, it's okay. It's a good reason. What I would say, okay, we will talk about this later. But yes, let's leave it there. So that's what you guys have to do. Just think of your reason and think of your opinion. Okay. Now, what else? What else do? We don't do anything else. We gotta be realistic, and 15 seconds are gonna go past before you even know it. So you only have enough time to do that, to just decide and think of a reason. But then your 15 seconds are over and you will have to start speaking and you will get 45 seconds to do so. So what do you do there? Here's what we're gonna do. This is the template that we will be using. Now, what you guys need to have, and this is the basic stuff that you guys need to make sure that you have, otherwise your response will be incomplete. First thing is an introduction. An introduction where you guys have to answer the question directly as you can. So in your introduction, that's everything you're gonna do. You're gonna express your opinion and answer the question in the most direct way that you can. How do we do this? The best tip that I can give you guys, in your introduction, you need two things. The first one, obviously, you're gonna use the pronoun I. So I, because you're talking about yourself, it's your opinion. The second, you need an adverb. What do I mean by an adverb? You need to use a word like strongly, totally, completely, certainly, absolutely. You need to use one of these reinforcing adverbs, okay? You may choose the one that you feel more comfortable with. That's up to you. But you gotta use one of these. And second thing that you guys need to do is you need to have the correct verb. You need to use the verb that they use in the question. You are gonna see, and we're gonna see as we practice and as we go, different verbs, different types of questions, but you have to repeat and use the same one. So in this case, the question was, do you agree or disagree, right? So the verb they are using is agree and disagree. So you are gonna use that verb. You're gonna say agree or disagree. In this case, we said that we disagree, so we will say disagree. So you will say, I strongly disagree. And here you have to try to tell me, or try to repeat what you had in the question, right? Repeat the statement. So I strongly disagree that learning through online courses is more efficient. That was the statement, right? So what did we do here? We have the pronoun I. We have an adverb, right? strongly. We have the correct verb, in this case, agree or disagree. And then we say that, and we repeat the statement, right? Whatever the statement is, we repeat it, but we try to summarize it a little bit, right? So we do not necessarily have to say everything. If we look at the question, it says, learning through online courses is more efficient than learning in traditional classroom setting. That is too long, and it is not convenient for you guys to repeat everything. So you have to summarize it. In this case, it's not necessary that you say all that. You just say, I strongly disagree that learning through online courses is more efficient. So I summarized it. I left the second part. I cut it off, right? I didn't say everything. Okay. Is this okay? Do you guys have any questions so far about the introduction? No questions? Okay, yes. So another thing I wanted to say, please don't waste time in your introductions. One thing that I've seen a lot is students wasting 15, 12, even 20 seconds in their introductions, just telling or expressing their opinions. That is a complete terrible idea, because you guys should not focus too much on your introduction. This is just like a formality, all right? So my advice is spend 7 to 8 seconds tops in the introduction. That's the most that you can spend, okay? So that's it, that's your introduction. Now, after you're done with your introduction and you have already said what you think, you have to give an example. I'm sorry, you have to give your reason, right? You have to tell me the reason that you thought about. So here you can use the word since, you can use the word because, you can use the word due to the fact that, or as, for, whichever you prefer, right? I have no problem with that. But to be honest, I don't really recommend that you use the word because it's too overused, it's too common. So it's better to use others. You can use since, like you have here, and that's great, you know? And you have to tell me your reason. So in this case, our reason was that it is easier to ask questions when you are taking traditional classes, right? Because you have the professor there face to face. So that's what we're gonna say. We're gonna say, I strongly disagree that it is more efficient to take online courses, since with traditional classes, you can see your professor face to face. Therefore, it is easier to ask them questions directly, right? That's it. As you can see, and another tip I can give you here, the biggest tip I can give you is please don't over-explain your reason. And that's another mistake that a lot of students make. I already said my reason, right? I said, since it's easier to ask questions when you take face-to-face classes. That's enough. I have to stop myself there. Because if you continue and you're like, okay, since it's easier to ask questions when you are taking face-to-face classes, because you have the professor there and you can just raise your hand and it's easy to ask them whatever you have as a question. Maybe if you didn't understand something about the topic that you're learning about, you just go ahead and ask the professor a question. All of that was completely unnecessary. I didn't need to say anything like that because it's obvious that if I have a question, it's because I didn't understand something, right? So please don't over-explain it. Go directly to the reason and don't explain it too much. Honestly, I wouldn't spend too much time here. I would just, I don't know, spend 10 to 20 seconds at most. 15 seconds would be a good number, but not more than that. Okay? Is that okay so far? You have your introduction, you have your reason, and we are there. Any questions? Right? Finally, and here's probably one of the most important parts, the key parts, you guys have to give an example. If you don't give examples, again, your response won't be complete. You have your introduction, your reason, and now you need an example. So when you guys are given examples, there are different ways in which you can do them. I will be telling you what types of examples you can give these days, because we're going to be working on this the entire week. So I will be giving you some suggestions on how to give examples these days. But right now, I will just tell you, try to give whatever example that you can think of. But the important thing is that it contains details. As the question said, it has to have specific details. Okay? So for example, you could say, you could talk about a personal experience, right? You could say, for instance, because during the pandemic, I was forced to take online courses in my university. I took this biology class specifically, and I noticed that, well, most of my classes were pre-recorded. That means that I didn't get to interact too much with my professor unless it was during exams or practice sessions. However, I found it very difficult to have a time where I could just ask questions to my professor, since I just had the lectures there and I didn't have a time in the lectures where I could ask questions like you normally do when you take face-to-face classes, right? So that's something that you can do in your example. So I'm giving specific details about one period of time where I took one specific online course and how it was, right? How my experience was. So is this okay? That's it. That's, you have the example and that's all you need. Those are the basic things that your response has to have. Now, obviously, if you guys have extra time, you're done with your example and you still have some more time, it's up to you. You can go with another reason if you want. But if you're gonna go for another reason, it has to be completely different than the previous one. So if in the first one you said that it's easier to ask questions, in the second one you have to say something completely different. You may say, for example, that it is easier to be concentrated, right? Maybe you can say that it's easier to get distracted with online courses, maybe, okay? So it has to be something different. And if you still have more time, you can go with a short conclusion. The conclusion is never necessary. It's an extra that if you have time, you can, right? But you do not really need a conclusion. So what do you guys think? Do you have any questions about this? No questions? Okay, guys. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna give you guys a sample response to this question so that you can see how I manage my time, the things that I say, how I say them. And now that you know how the responses are evaluated, you can evaluate my response, right? You can be judging it. Feel free to give me any suggestions, any tips that you have. So ask yourself those questions, right? Did I manage my time well? Did I have a good delivery? Did I pronounce the words correctly? Did I make too many pauses? Did I use good connectors, good transition words? Were my ideas concise? Were they clear? Did they make sense? Did I use enough grammar, enough vocabulary? So you can be asking yourself those questions so that you start analyzing responses like that. And one day you're going to be able to analyze your own responses. So I'm going to do it. Let's see. I strongly disagree that it's more efficient to take online courses, since with online courses, it is way easier to get distracted. For instance, during the COVID-19 pandemic, in my university, we were forced to take some online courses, and I took one biology course at the time. In fact, during this course, I had to take classes mostly at night, and I was very tired at night after the entire day taking other classes. Therefore, I felt that when I was taking the class, I usually got distracted with things that I had around me. For instance, I would go on my phone, I would check social media. Sometimes I would start chatting with my friends. Sometimes I would just get distracted with my family that would be having dinner there. And that's why I felt that I didn't really understand too much the content of the course, right? So that's like That's a sample response. It wasn't perfect, but I think it does illustrate at least what you guys have to have, right? The elements. You need to have your introduction, where you directly answer the question. You need to have your reason, short, but concise and clear and logical. And in your example, you need to have as many details as you can, and that's where you can elaborate your response. I could have probably done my example in less time. Maybe I had too many details, I don't know. But it's always good to make sure that you have enough details, because I didn't need to have a second reason, right? So I thought, why am I even gonna bother? I just have one example and that's it. So what do you guys think? Do you have any questions now? Is everything clear? Yes, all clear? Okay, guys. So let's do another sample question. So let's say we have this one here. It's related. It says, do you prefer to study at home or in a library? Provide specific details to support your explanation. If you guys think about it, the question is different, right? Because it's not agree or disagree. In this case, is preference. Do you prefer this or do you prefer that? What do you do in this case? You do exactly the same, but the only thing that will actually change is your introduction. So if you had to answer that question, then it's a preference question, not an agree or disagree. So what do you do instead of saying I strongly agree? You can say, for instance, I totally prefer, and then you go for the option, right? The option that you choose. So for example, if you prefer to study in a library, you could say, I totally prefer to study in a library, right? Or I totally prefer studying at home. That's the only thing that actually changes, but everything else stays the same. You still have to have a reason, you still have to have an example. Okay? So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna give you guys 15 seconds for you to prepare this response. All right? So do you prefer to study at home or in a library? Now you will have 15 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So does anybody want to try? We can leave the template here. Does anyone want to try? Nobody? Come on, guys. Maybe Nicolas? Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I totally prefer um, I don't know.
I don't know if I should leave you with the template or the question, because in the real test, you will see the question, right? The question was studying in a library or at home, right?
Okay. I totally prefer studying at home. Um, since it's more it's more comfortable. For instance, when I am at home, I don't need to I don't have any distractions. Furthermore, I can search information wherever I want in my laptop. And yeah.
All right, good. So you had a great introduction. You had a good reason. Since when I'm at home, I don't have as many distractions, or I think you said, yeah, right, that you don't have too many
Yeah.
distractions. So it's great, but you are missing one point, the example, right? You need to give, also tell me, for instance, I don't know, I have my own desk at home, I live alone, right? So you start giving examples. And whenever I have a big exam that I have to prepare for, I always make sure that I study at home and I don't go to the library where there are like at least other 50 students studying and making noise, right? So try to give those details. You can also talk about that one single experience, right? You could say, so for instance, once I couldn't study at home and I went to a library and these things distracted me, right? And you're specific about
Okay.
it. Don't forget that. But it was a great response. I'm gonna thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's another type, right? When you have preference. Now, what is the other type of question you can have? Sometimes they just ask you, do you think? So that's another way, another type of question you can also have. I'm gonna show you guys an example. Okay. So for example, let's say we have this question in here. Okay. Now the question here says, instead of phoning friends and family, many people prefer to communicate by sending text messages. Do you think that it is a good idea to use texting as a primary means of communication? Support your points with the specific examples and details. So in this case, the question is, do you think that it's a good idea to use texting as a primary means of communication? So do you think that it's better, that it's a good idea to use texting instead of calling people? That is the question, right? Should you text or call people? So in this case, it isn't so clear. It isn't as easy to see what the options are, but it's just a matter of getting used to this type of questions, believe me. So how do you answer this type of question? In the same way as all of the others. The only thing that's gonna change is your introduction again. So this time, when you have the good idea, bad idea, instead of saying I totally prefer, you can say I absolutely think, or I certainly think it's a good idea, or I completely think it's not a good idea, right? I don't know. So in this case, you could say, I absolutely think it's a good idea to text people instead of calling them, or I totally think it's not a good idea, or I don't think it's a good idea to text people instead of calling them, right? I think it's better to call them. That's the only thing that changes, right? But everything else is still the same. So the tip that I'm giving you guys for your introductions is just use the same verb that you have in the question, right? If the question is, do you agree or disagree? Then use that verb. If the question is, do you prefer this or that? Use prefer. And if the question is, do you think it's a good idea or not? Use this verbs. I think it is a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea. Okay, so it's the same thing here. I'm gonna give you guys 15 seconds for you to prepare your responses to this questioning here, and then somebody else will try. Okay, guys, so who wants to try this time?
I want to try, Andrea.
Okay, thank you, Ben. So please go ahead.
Okay. I think that but I prefer using text as a primary means of communication because it's more comfortable. And when you phone others, they can make other think. For example, yesterday I have a dinner with my friends, so my classmates called me, and I cannot respond because I made other things, and I prefer they text me so I can respond later or other things to explain the different work that we have to do. So I think I prefer text as a primary means of communication in this case.
Great, perfect, Nancy. That was an awesome response. So you had the structure, it was perfect. You had your introduction, your short reason, and a detailed example. It was related, which was related to your reason. I love the details in your example, actually. The only thing, maybe careful always with the tenses if you're going to talk about past experiences. But other than that, it was a great response. Thank you, Pence. Okay. So that is it. Okay, those are the three types that you can have. And if you have another type of question, it'll be the same, right? At the end of the day, you just have 2 or 3 options to choose from. You just have to choose one of the options. And the important thing is that you answer the question directly, right? Without going into like complicated things or we're explaining things too much. Some tips I can give you, keep it simple. I don't know why, like I've seen some students who want to like talk about complicated ideas, use complex vocabulary, but honestly, it's okay to keep simple ideas here. Like personally, when I got this question, I did something very simple, very something that that doesn't require that much thought. But the important thing is that you do like try to be careful with your grammar, with your delivery, the way you manage your time, and all the things we talked about, right? Because remember, there's not a rubric, not a criteria that says that they evaluate your response based on the content, right? Based on what you actually say. So you can say anything. You could say that you prefer texting since it's cheaper, or maybe since it's, or you could say that you prefer phoning because it's cheaper. Even if it isn't, right? Nobody is going to check that. So it doesn't matter what you say as long as it is logical or it is coherent to the response, then it's still okay. Okay, guys? So what do you think now? Do you guys have any questions about what we did today? Tomorrow we'll continue working. We'll be looking at some sample responses and analyzing them. And yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. And we'll also practice because it's a practice session. So no questions really? Okay, guys. So please, before you go then, don't forget today's daily survey. It should be on your screens. And I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow.
Bye, Andrea. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye, Nicolas.